War II had brought enormous losses and destruction to the Soviet Union. Immediately after the war, Stalin called for sacrifice, superhuman work, and rigid conformity. He refused any help from other countries and sent anyone who could have been influenced by Westerners to prison, where they were either shot or sentenced to forced labor. This helped descend the world into the Cold War, which pitted Western democracies against the Soviet Union and their allies. Germany was divided between the West and the Soviet Union. The U.S. tried to check Soviet expansion with the Marshall Plan, which aimed to give extensive economic aid to Europe. Each side spent the rest of the war building up their arsenals and creating large treaty groups. Only the fear of another world war kept the factions from attacking.
Stalin died on March 5, 1953 at 74 years old due to natural causes. Nikita Khrushchev was the Soviet leader from 1956 to 1964. With Khrushchev in power, Stalinism was out of date and the new methods were formed for the Soviet Union to function more efficiently. Khrushchev propounded an extension of the Leninist principle of peaceful coexistence, arguing that capitalism and socialism could live side by side until the time when socialism takes over, then war was inevitable. Victory could come by peaceful means. In the late 1950s, Khrushchev encountered many difficulties with China. By 1960, the differences of the Soviet Union and China had erupted into direct public action. The Soviet Union cut off aid to China and split.
In the 1950s and early 1960s, tension was high in Russia because of the Cold War and the threat of Germany rearming themselves against the USSR. In 1961, the Berlin Wall was built to cut off the German Democratic Republic from West Germany, but the wall went against socialism and gave Russia a bad image. During Khrushchev's rule, Russia's economy grew, which put them in a more competitive position to become a top superpower.
With the Soviet Union starting to come back to its strength, it brought fear to the West. To ease the tension between the West and the Soviet Union, Brezhnev began Detente. The West wasn't unwilling to cooperate with the Soviet Union, but tensions grew further after it was agreed that Vietnam was to be divided into the North Communist and South Anti-Communist divisions in 1954. The United States felt inclined to help the South fight communism. This ultimately led America being intertwined in the Vietnam War. With the Soviet Union supporting the North and the US the South, tensions grew between them, yet both downplayed the events going on to prevent conflict. In 1968, many anti-communists began revolting against the Soviet Union. Led by Dubček, the anti-communists were able to free themselves. This didn't last long, however, since the Red Army, Eastern Europe's army, reconquered them, forcing them back under communist rule. Many opposed this decision, yet Brezhnev did not care. This created conflict with the West as more and more riot outbreaks began to occur.
Instead of trying to renew Nikita Khrushchev's efforts to rejuvenate the economy and society, Brezhnev opted for political continuity and Soviet military expansion. They sullenly failed because of their own crisis. Meanwhile, they could not keep up with the advancing nations of Europe and Asia. The next successor, Michael Gorbachev, was ready to put the Soviet Union back together again.